Lukashenko is no longer an outcast. He's a negotiation partner, not a Kremlin puppet. The United States bought the prisoners' freedom in exchange for fertilizers. Lukashenko unexpectedly released 123 political prisoners. All of them, along with their families, are leaving, some to Ukraine, some to the Baltic countries, and some to Europe. In the United States, they even released those who had been imprisoned since 2020 and had lost hope of ever getting out, let alone leaving freely. But what happened? Trump proposed to release the prisoners in exchange for easing American sanctions, specifically in the area of fertilizer purchases, but the Western liberals didn't like that.
The release of prisoners. President Trump says that lifting sanctions is a necessary price to pay in order to secure the release of political prisoners. From your perspective, should freedom be negotiated at all? Doesn't that risk more repression?
For years, the West has tried to impose its values globally. To be clear, I support these values, but not forcing them on others. And even decades of sanctions, which have led to nothing, have not been able to convince them that something they are doing is not working. That means the strategy should be changed altogether. When something doesn't work, you need to try to find something else. The only thing is, you can't force someone to love themselves or to love freedom. Those who have been imprisoned themselves or have waited for their loved ones see the situation differently. Here is Svetlana Tikhanovskaya.
These are our people, and the fact that the United States is working on their release is a shared achievement. Of course, it's a huge joy for us to see people who are now free, I know what it means for their families, because I remember when my own husband was released, what a relief it was for them. And it was especially important for those who had waited for years without phone calls, letters, or even proof that their loved ones were alive.
I'm sure that Trump has another idea in mind, to open a dialogue with Lukashenko like, you can talk to us. We're people who are ready to discuss and solve problems. And if not now, of course, if your country suddenly has problems with Moscow, then maybe, well, something like that could happen. Through the already established channel, we'll talk about something bigger than just 123 dissidents in prison.
And if the United Kingdom does not recognize Alexander Lukashenko as the legitimate president of Belarus, by making this deal, President Trump is actually granting him international legitimacy. And if so, does it matter?
I don't think so, because Trump talks to everyone and openly says he makes deals with dictators and authoritarian leaders. His style is quite unique, unlike Europeans. If Merz, Macron, or Starmer call Lukashenko a respected president, the impact will be entirely different. But when President Trump does it, we understand his approach is pragmatic, he's deal-oriented, he wants to reach an agreement, he wants to free people, he wants to achieve peace. So I don't think this will bring any kind of legitimization to Lukashenko. It may give him some points and bargaining power, but it's not crucial. European pressure matters much more. As President Tikhanovskaya said,
Europe hasn't lifted any of its sanctions against Lukashenko, but for the United States, Lukashenko is no longer an outcast. For the United States, he's now included in the bargaining club. I don't even know how to call it. The club of those we negotiate with. And he has become a negotiation partner, and Trump's personal envoy, United States President John Cohen, flies to meet him. The United States decides whom to punish. For example, Maduro in Venezuela rigged his own elections, and he is under pressure, including from the American fleet, while Lukashenko stole and rigged his own elections, and he is being offered to resume supplies. Potash, that's probably what it's called, yes, potash, and to save him from financial problems. What's the difference? Remember, we discussed that countries are allowed to do whatever they want. Well, they are independent, even if they are small countries. Yes, except for one thing, interfering in our lives. And by interference, I mean making our lives worse in some way. Consider Venezuela. They bring drugs here and from our perspective don't make our lives better. They're building a base for China and Russia right under our noses, and they're sending, or have already sent, hundreds of thousands of their people to us, including criminals and crazy people. But Belarus isn't doing anything bad. Well, the country is in an alliance with Russia and helps it fight, but it doesn't actually take part in the war itself and just imprisons its own dissidents. Neither Nigeria, nor Chad, nor Morocco, nor Tanzania care about this or impose sanctions on Belarus, and the United States won't be doing it anymore either. This will continue until Minsk starts doing something that we consider negative interference in our lives. What happens inside Belarus is not our business. What happens inside Chad is not our business. What happens inside? I can go through all the rest of them. There are almost 200 countries in the world. It's not our business. So Washington no longer pretends not to talk to dictators. It just negotiates, bargains for good prices, and has stopped running around the world promoting democracy that 75% of humanity doesn't need. People in Gaza, Iran, Russia, and Belarus have become living collateral for trade. Belarusian human rights activists say that Lukashenko will sell others for concessions as new offers come in from the West. Europe continues to call Lukashenko a criminal, but Europe will soon cease to exist, and it no longer wants to pay attention to the future caliphate of the United States of America. Sanctions were supposed to force Minsk to change its system, but they failed. And a different, much more pragmatic game has come into play. It's clear that the prisoners were released by a call from Lukashenko. This is not about rights or humanism, it's a slave market. Even if they're not called slaves, but hostages or political prisoners or by some other names. The list includes those who were named Nobel laureate Belyansky and opposition leader Kolesnikova. Realists say it's better to live than to die in prison. If they have to make a deal with the devil for that, so be it. That is the price of their salvation. People who say they are principled opposition claim that this legalizes human trafficking. Lukashenko received a signal that by having many people in prisons, he could get something for them. But what does he actually want, the devil himself? Well, at least to unfreeze part of the Western markets so that the country can earn much-needed foreign currency from fertilizers. And somehow, of course, this will reduce dependence on Putin. To show Putin that Belarus has an alternative and that he can bargain for support, having, so to speak, new cards in his hand. Continuation. To rewrite his own image, the image of his regime, from being the last dictator in Europe to an honest, or maybe not honest, but tough, let's put it that way, tough, but capable of negotiating leader, if the President of the United States is negotiating with him. What do Washington and the White House want? The administration wants to show that sanctions are working by turning political pressure into the real release of living people who would otherwise rot in prison. They eased the sanctions a little, released a few people. Well, that's a small start. We'll see how it goes. And to create what they call a back channel, that is, a kind of channel for confidential communication. And maybe later for conversations, informal, unofficial talks with Moscow through Minsk. Continuation for solving issues without the participation of all other partners, including Europe. In what way? Yes, in everything. In Ukraine's affairs, in European security matters, in matters of relations. When you don't want to raise this question directly, but you can ask it through a side or back channel, as it's called in Russian. In world history lessons, we know that the freedom of an individual under a dictatorial regime doesn't depend on the law, but on whether it's beneficial for those in power to let him go. Well, as part of some big deal, so to speak, yeah, that's it. We won't try to force Muslims to abandon Islam and embrace democracy. That's our new position. Unlike, say, previous presidents. Well, like Bush Jr., for example, yes. As soon as they see how good life is under democracy, they'll abandon their own laws and switch to democratic laws. That's the moment I realized I was no longer with him. Before that, I liked how he responded to September 11th, and something else. And then I heard that and decided, no, this guy doesn't understand anything about what he's about to do. So we won't trade or not trade with dictators we don't like. But with those dictators we liked, we not only traded with them, but also subsidized them. So with some, we pretended to fight them because they were dictators, and with others, we were kissing them French style. So they were against the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or against communism, or against China, or at least pretended to be, and that's why we liked those dictators. Well, it was all pretense, of course, and in both cases, China was making money off of it. They kept trading. We spent trillions on bribes to countries that could have switched to the enemy. We built our policy on deception, and now we're honestly explaining everything to everyone. It's our business when the actions of other countries affect us. If they don't affect us, if they don't specifically affect the United States, then we won't do anything about it. If you live in this region and it affects you, then you do something about it. Not some abstract beloved humanism, tolerance, morality, or honor. If it's happening somewhere else, please don't ask us to come and start a massacre against those who violated your morals. Later, you end up hating us even more than those we restrained at your request. Belarus is one of the first signs of the new United States doctrine that the world will have to get used to. And by the way, that's what George Washington once wrote in what's called the Farewell Address, the Farewell Letter of 1790 or 1796. That's how it is. And don't tie this to what he wrote. Don't bind yourself with permanent alliances and commitments to European powers. He disliked them more than anyone else. They have their own long-standing hatreds and quarrels. These are not our problems. Keep faith, be just with everyone, cultivate peace and harmony through trade and honesty in relationships. Washington believed that the United States should set an example for the world with a generous new policy of free trade and respect for the independence of other nations. For 2 centuries, America has meddled in others' conflicts. Subtitles by Dima Torzok. It punishes some and rewards others. It's time to return to Washington's testament. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell if you want to get notifications about new videos on this channel. If you don't want to, by all means, don't subscribe. See you next time.